check the introduction.
Okay, we're live. Huh?
Okay.
Okay, you can start first.
Obeisance to my Guru and protector Manjushri, who holds at his
Hard, a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are. His understanding shines forth like the sun, clouded by defilements or traces of ignorance. Teaches in 60 ways with the patient love of a father for his only son. Creatures out in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering, whose dragon thunder proclamation of the Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions, frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews down suffering, ever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance, whose princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, has been pure from the beginning. Wisdom, eliminate the darkness enclosing my mind,
enlighten my intelligence and
wisdom so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words,
the texts
could explain them.
to the perfection of wisdom indescribable by words or thoughts, which
does not cease in nature like space, whose object belongs to the individual subject's awareness, prostrate to the mother of the conquerors of the 3 times.
Thus did I hear it
One time, the Bhagavan was dwelling in the west of Moksha's mountain. He had, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas,
At that time,
The Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. So at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Haryavalokiteshvara,
looked upon
upon the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom,
and beheld those five
it's also as empty of inherent nature.
Then through the
Power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Haryavalokiteshvara. Could any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? And that in the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Haryavalokiteshvara, this to the Venerable Shariputra. Putra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty and in nature.
Form is empty.
Form, emptiness is not other than form, also not other than emptiness. The same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. But likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, and produced unceased, stainless, not without stain, but deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, like wherein for emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, visual form, no sound, no odor, no smells, no object to touch, and no phenomenon, no eye element, and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. Hence no extinction of ignorance and so on, to including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Which therefore, because there is no attainment, sattvas rely on to dwell in the perfection of wisdom, mind without obscuration and without fear. They completely pass beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. The Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken, surpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. For the mantra, the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, past mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, so that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Dhyayata hom gate gate parasam gate bodhi soham. Putra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. The Bhagavan arose in that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Haryavalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that one should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, indicated even that Haragatas rejoice. When having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Haryavalokiteshvara, the surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan.
I prostrate to the gathering of Dakinis in the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical illumination, look after practitioners like a mother looks after a child. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessed
in the power of truth, and the hindrances be transformed, be dispelled, may they be pacified, be completely pacified. Sandam Korare Soha.
May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with Dharma. And may there be auspiciousness
and happiness right now. Just something to mention here, because it looks like, I'm not sure if any of you know this. With the prayer to the lion-faced Dakini, right, then you do the Akasamata, that mantra. For one thing, we don't really need to do that here, I think, at the teaching, but we do it in Chura, right, all the time. You know that when you use the mala, you want to. It's good if you have a mala, yeah, because its point is to be dispelling the obstacles like this, right? But so not pulling, but pushing the mala out, yeah. And then yeah, Jada Rinpoche, he had mentioned that. I guess this is the tradition that you're weakening the spirits this way, the harmful forces. So you don't want to complete the mala because then it'll kill them. So you go almost to the end of the mala. That's why you see them when they do it, they'll like skip, they'll do many beads at a time. So in a short period of time, they almost go to the end of the mala, but you don't finish the mala. That seems to be the oral tradition.
Okay.
Yeah, but we don't need to do it in the teaching. I don't think they usually do it with the Lamrim teachings. Yeah. Okay, so we can continue. Foundation of all good qualities.
Foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure Guru.
Correct devotion to him is the root of the path. Clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Understanding that this precious freedom, the freedom of earth, is found only once, is great and meaningful, it is difficult to find again.
Please
Bless me the blessed mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. Life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. To death, just like a shadow follows the body, results of black and white karma follow.
finding firm
With definite conviction in this, we must be to be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities, accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. By this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the pratimoksha vows, having necessity to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother migratory beings. Please bless me to this great supreme bodhicitta to bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta, but I don't practice the three types of morality, I will be achieved enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows with great energy. I have pacified distraction to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality. Please bless me to penetrate quickly within my mind stream, the unified path of combining and special insight. Having become clear vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to generate the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping pure vows and samaya. And I have become firmly convinced of this. Please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life.
Then, having realized the
Importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, practicing in two stages, then we give up the 4 sessions. Bless me to the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the teachers show the noble path, and the spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. Bless me to generate completely all outer and inner hindrances. All my lives never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent path. By completing the qualities, the stages and paths, quickly attain the state of Vajradhara.
Sangye Shengdu Mekte Puai Droge Nandai Jengai Chavarai Joy. This ground anointed with perfumes, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, contains the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha feel and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure one. May my venerable Lama's life be firm, his white divine actions spread in the 10 directions. May the torch of the teachings of Losang always remain, dispelling the darkness of all beings in these 3 realms. I send forth this Chulmanara to you, precious Guru.
Judan Zugi Junam La Jundu Badu Dani Gebzuji Hagi Chuden Gipe Tsunam Ki Drola Bendu Sangi Druba Zangi Chudan Zugi Junam La Jundu Badu Dani Gebzuji Dagi Chuden Gipe Tsunam Ki Drola Bendu Sangi Druba Zangi Chudan Zugi Junam La Dande Badu Dani Gebzuji Dagi Chuden Gipe Tsunam Ki La Bendu Zangi Druba I'm not sure where you learned that mandala offering.
Say again.
I'm not sure where you learned that tune for the mandala offering.
You said it last time, so I tried to do it better this time.
I said that last time.
Yeah, you said the tune was off, so I tried to do it better
Oh.
this time.
Well, it's I don't know. It's a different, certainly a different one than we usually do here, right? So it's good if if maybe Wanchu can try. You know the regular one we do, because it's good if you guys can try to use the one we use in the monastery, because otherwise other people can't follow it. They can't. I don't think they were able to follow the tune because they didn't know it. Maybe it's from Drikung or something. Drikung Kagyu. I don't know. Maybe the Dakinis taught you. I don't know.
Well, I did get into some Greek lineage.
Yeah, so maybe it's from a different lineage, but nothing wrong with that. But it's good if here we get used to the one that we use in the monastery, so we can train in it. So, do you know exactly what sentence we left off in?
Well, the one I have here was the Dompa Tamche Kitendo Gyurpa Ni, but it might be also Mön Sape Leki Jipanam.
Yeah, I think that's right. because I was looking here, and it would seem that we would have stopped at a regular break. I have the page written, right? But I know we read this part about the Dompa Gie from the Kabdu Dunchupa, right? It says Genyan Sum La Kabdro Wa Dini Dom Get Sawa Yen Dom Ge, yeah. So I remember talking about that. So we must have stopped in the middle. So maybe they Gonsaki Gewele. So here we are in the section on, right, so hopefully I said the last 2 times we'll finish the section of Refuge today. So hopefully this time we actually will. Not that we need to rush through it, but maybe we're going a bit slow. So we have the Mangak Le Jungwe Pei and Ge is the 8 benefits as they appear in the oral instructions, right? Versus the Dua Le Jungwa, as they appear in Asanga's compendium. So and this is all part of this fifth precept of refuge, right? So knowing the benefits, then going for refuge 3 times by day, 3 times by night. So we'll summarize all 6 at the end. So we'll just continue here with the 8 benefits, the Peng Ge, right? So Gonsape Gewe, Gonsape Legi Dripa Nam Sapshing, right? So all the previous karmic obscurations you've accumulated will thin, sap. And zepar, zem is the present of se, right? Sata se, to exhaust. Zepar gyur. So zepar gyur means they will exhaust. In the future, gradually they will, right? So labdusu, right? So in labdu from Shantideva, kapsu drowe dikpa dapper dombe kabzu. So in the that's not a quotation. It's saying in the context of talking about how you will purify your karma, your sins, what's dikba, by going for refuge. Then he says, dir paki dokpa jupa paper chow, per chow, right? So take as an example the story of the realization of the pig. So it says underneath here what that means. Jesumpe paktu kyuragirwelai bu kabdur chepe dir makepa tabude, right? So at the time of death, this Devaputra, he went to refuge. He knew that he was going to be born as a pig. He could tell from his clairvoyance, right? But then by going for refuge, then he wasn't born there. I have a note here, right? This is the point of debate because, so it says if you have Kebjo at the time of death, you won't fall to the lower realms, right? But then there's the story, like, it says in the Kerap, right, in the Jataka tales, Legiran from Imbasamikya, Tsewe Dani, Dundru Kewagyur, right? So the ripening of karma is inconceivable. Even the essence of compassion, we're talking about a bodhisattva, they're born as an animal, right? So it's probably about the life story of the Buddha, right? He was born as an animal in the past life. But the point, the question there is, well, how can a bodhisattva not die with refuge, right? Bodhisattvas are supposed to have at least senke, which is even stronger than refuge, right? Bodhicitta, all the time. So why would they be born in the lower realms? Maybe it's not cap, maybe it's not 100%, we don't know. That's the whole point of the story, is it's inconceivable. As we talked about before, karma in general is not said to be very hidden, but the specific way it ripens is very difficult to comprehend. It's too many factors. Kabju chepe ngenju gyurdape churo, right? So by going for refuge, you purify the cause of the ngendro, right? So really evil gone or unfortunate migration. Gandak Sangye, what is this quote from? Doesn't say. Gandak Sangye Kapsongwa Dera Genjo Dromigyur. It's the one who goes refuge to the Buddha does not go to the unfortunate migrations. Miluni Pongne Su Dera Lai Lutopo. Right, so having abandoned the body of the human, then they will go to the God realm. Or they'll achieve a God body, Deva's body. I think this is still a quote from Labdu, is the idea. This is all written in Labdu. She che tang gendun la yang there are sungso. It's the same thing for going refuge to the Dharma and the Sangha. Then ngun sape dikpal ni Sapagyurla. So as for your old, Zikba lalani, right? So as for some of your old karmas, your old sins, I don't know what's the better word for it, negativities, will be thinned out, and lalani zippergis, some of them will exhaust completely, right? And then sonam gachempo sopani. So this is the question, right? So I mean, you'll have this a lot later when you learn about the abandonment of the negativities, but you really can't abandon something from the root unless you have a realization of emptiness, right? So which is the ones that exhaust completely? That's maybe a good debate about that, but I think the idea is at least they won't ripen in any meaningful way. So then you will accumulate great merit. We've explained this before earlier in the, I think in the benefits as they appear in Dua. We already talked about that. Yeah. And then the next, number 5, Ngendro Mitonwa Ngarshipachao, and also the same as before, you will not fall to the unfortunate migration. And then Mita Mimaingi Barchigi Machi Mikitsupas, you'll be invulnerable to the obstacles of humans and non-humans. So as it says in the Do. So this is the sutra, this is the Gyaltsen Dampe Dole, the excellent victory banner sutra. It's quoted in Kautapachitam. Jipe trape minamni pelchirida nakseltan. Kunga tani chuneki junching namlat kabdurte. And so people in the world who are frightened by terrors, for the most part, they go for refuge to the mountains and to the forest. And Kunga is a temple, to temples, and chunegi junjing, right? So then trees that are objects of offering. You'll see that often in Indian towns, right? They'll have the tree in the town where they make offerings. This is not the main refuge. They kept a chokyurmayanos. That is not the supreme refuge. But you see, it says it's a refuge, right? That's one of the debates you'll have when you debate about kebzum, is what is kapkitse? What does it mean? What is the definition of a kap? Right? So some people would say that it's more narrow, but it's quite clear here. It's saying that is the cap. You have to think about what does it mean to go for refuge, right? It means that you entrust yourself to something. So if you're experiencing harm or suffering, you entrust yourself to something, thinking that that will free you from it. So I think Lama Yeshe said something like you take refuge in your refrigerator, right? But that's literal. That's a joke. I mean, it's meant, maybe it's a bit of a joke, but the point is that's what happens. People, they feel uncomfortable and they just go and eat because it makes them, I mean, it's what happens, right? People do that because it's a way of temporarily assuaging the feeling of discomfort. It's not actually, in that case, it's often not because you actually need food, right? So it's a misdirected, essentially. It's not going to solve the problem. But some people think, well, there's no better way, so that you might as well distract yourself. But here, then, of course, there's other ways where people have a little bit more thoughtfulness, so they hide in the forest because the king is attacking them or they're in some other danger, right? But it's not. It is a refuge, but it's not the best refuge because it's not going to be stable in the long term. So the idea here is that, as we talked about, safe direction is another way to translate it. What direction do you go in? Where do you go thinking that will free you? So there's all kinds of temporary refuges. You'll talk about this too in the Kabzum section. You have the Donda Bekap, Kunsa Bekap, which is also Tarda Bekap, Negaki Kap, right? So temporary refuge and then ultimate or final refuge. So other things can free you periodically, but they're not going to, it's just a matter of using reasoning here, really. You have to think about, in the long run, is this going to benefit me? Right? For me, anyway, that's the most helpful, right? I find it a lot more helpful to think reasonably about these things rather than have kind of an emotional experience. You're so attached to this particular lama, or also for things like objects of attachment. My classmate last night is so good at debate. It's really nice to debate with him. But we were talking about attachment and how is it a wrong view, and then can you counter it? And then if you're attached to a woman, what do you do? And I was saying that you think about the drawbacks of this, right, of pursuing the object of attachment. For me, that's a lot more helpful than there's other meditations you can do on meditating on ugliness and foulness of the body and so forth. But it depends on the person, really, they say. But for me, just thinking about it, just thinking, is this in the long run, what's going to be the result of following through with this attachment? And likewise here, you think about, you're scared, so you run in the forest. But if you really thought about it, is that going to solve my problem to go hide in the forest, right? And then same with the refrigerator. I mean, it's really not a joke. If you really think about it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now we could say, well, if you're just addicted to something, it doesn't help to think about it, but it's because you're not thinking hard enough, I think, really. Like Shantideva says in the ninth chapter, right, in Shunju, what is it? Dera gyume pumela, jira gyume pume tone ni jira nyamondogir de che penny delani. It's not going very well right now, but I get the basic point. That's the exact quote. Chepa keba gurani. Dini nyomo. Dene de chepanini nyomo bacha mapampa. Dene de tonwana de tony bacha nyamchungyan. So it's saying, so somebody is arguing that meditation and emptiness is not going to free you from attachment, because they say, for example, you have the example he gives is a person who has emanated is a magician or something. He's emanated an illusory woman, but still he's attached to her because she's beautiful. So just because you know that it's an illusion doesn't mean that you won't have attachment to it. I mean, we could say the same thing today. You watch TV, you know there's nothing there, but you certainly get attached to it if you see beautiful people on the TV screen, right? People happens all the time. People spend a lot of money for that. So, but then Shantideva replies, well, that's because their imprints of inflictions are so strong, and their imprint of meditation and emptiness is so feeble. So if they meditate strongly on emptiness, that won't happen. But the problem is that it's just they don't actually apply the antidote strongly enough. It's just like they have an intellectual understanding. Of course, the magician knows that the woman he's emanating is illusion, just like when you're watching TV, there's nobody there. But nevertheless, it's if we habituate with that, then it's just you're just going to get more and more attached. So, ganse ganshik sange tang churan gendung caps. Oh, so I missed one. Capte lani dene kyang dungel kune midril shing. So on the basis of that refuge, you will not be totally free of suffering. Right? So then gangse gangshik sange tang churan gendung capsoma. So when somebody goes for refuge of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, dungel kunjung tang dungel yandak depatang. So from suffering and from the origination of suffering, and then dungal yandak depa, they will pass beyond suffering. It's funny that passage. It's interesting to see what mean the first dungal and the dungal kunjung and the third dungal. Now, when we debated this back in Kapsum, which is in the Shungning part, the 5th year, I hadn't learned debate well enough by that, even though by the 5th year, to think about this. But now we would go right into this. You'd ask in debate, what is the first dugal? What is the second dugal? What is the third? Try to figure out what it's saying, right? The wording doesn't, literally it makes sense, but why does he say dugal 3 times, right? There must be some reason. It should just say dugal kunjung le depa, but it says dungal kunjung dang, dungal yandak depa tang. Usually there's some allegorical reason or something that's a point that's being made. But alas, we didn't discuss that. Maybe in the Halaram class, we'll come back to that again. So paklam yanak ge de wa. So the paklam yanak ge, you all know what that is, right? The noble eightfold path is happiness. Well, we were just talking about that recently somewhere. Somebody, because the paklam yanak ge, right? You don't know in English. You generally know the noble eightfold path, I assume, right? I mean, you don't have to, if you can't list it, you know what I'm talking about, right? So, yeah, the understanding of it in the Tibetan system might be different than it is in the Theravada. That was what the question was. But for Tibetan, in the Tibetan system, the Paklamyana Ge only is at the Gomnam, right? It's the path of meditation. It's a very advanced realization, but it's something that we can practice, right? This Lakpe Nam Lape Lapa Sum, right? The 3 higher trainings. Sultram Sing is in Shera, right? So ethical discipline, concentration, and wisdom. Those subsume the Paklamyana Ge, which is essentially the path of the truth of the path, right? Lamden, right? So so the key point here is when you get the Paklamyana Ge. So just briefly, right? Yanda bit tawa, yanda bit dopa, yanda bit ngat, yanda bit legita, yanda bit soa, yanda bit sua, yanda bit trempa, yanda bit tingizin. Yeah, yeah, good. So that yeah, okay, yeah. That's the Eightfold Path. That is a golem, right? It's a dalam. It's a how do you say? It's a super mundane path, right? So when he's saying that is happiness, he's saying achieving the direct perception of reality. That is happiness. That is the real path to happiness. Yang lange depa drogirto, right? It brings you to nirvana. Pape dembo shipodak sherekini tachepa, right? So you examine with wisdom the 4 noble truths. Right? That's essentially what the Eightfold Path is supposed to be doing. The Yanda Betao, the first one, right? And the Yanda Betokwa, the right analysis. And then Kabdet So Mayan Day, right? That is not the main cap. Oh, Kabdet, sorry. Kabdet Soho Yimpade, that is the main cap. The previous one was not. Kabdet Chok de Gurpai, that is the supreme cap. Kapte Lani Deni Kyang, Dungao Kun Le Drowa Gyur, right? So on the basis of that refuge, then you will be free of all suffering. So this was the point of this, was the benefit is that humans and non-humans will not harm you. Well, it's interesting. How does it say that exactly? It's just saying that you will eventually achieve nirvana, right? So then he gives this example. Der mutek lung shukpala sokpe tam nam perchaho. So it's the Tertika, the non-Buddhist lung shak drupa. So yeah, anyway, I have a note here. It's talking about this story where Lung Shak Drupa, I don't know if that's the person's name, but Lung is wind, right? Shak is a noose, right? And then who achieved the wind noose. But the point is there was somebody with a magical rope and he would tie people up, but then there was a Buddhist, someone who'd gone for refuge, and he couldn't tie him up with the magical rope because he'd gone for refuge. So this is more in this like kind of temporal sense. He's saying you can't be harmed. As I said, I think we have to be, take this not as 100% or totally literally, because otherwise it would follow that nobody who goes refuge is ever harmed, which we see that all the time. But there is a sense that this is your true protection, right? That it depends on your karma very much, but it has some benefit. It has, if you really go for refuge, if you have the karma, then it can free you. And if you don't have the karma, then maybe there's not a lot you can do about it, but it'll lessen it anyway. I've always felt that since I was a monk, right? The first year I was a monk, I used to wear a protection cord like we do as lay people, Buddhist lay people, right? But then the gecko, he told me to take it off, right? Most geckos wouldn't do that, but the one who lives over there now. And then that was a good lesson for me, and I thought about it, and I felt that this is our real refuge, is having your monastic vows and guarding that. So getting so attached to wearing something when actually as a monk you're not supposed to wear things, then sort of like you're making more a boundary. Anyway, so since then I never worn, except actually remember Lama Zeb Rinpoche did give me a little amulet to wear once with like mantras in it. So of course I had to wear it. He gave it to me. But then my classmates were making fun of me at Shura. They would reach down my shirt. What's this? And they'd pull it out during the damcha, right? So they show it to everybody. So that's how they are, right? They make the point very not slightly indirect way, but in some sense in a more blunt way. So yeah, I think the point here is if you go for refuge, that is your protection. If you have compassion for beings, that is your protection. So, chi sampa tamche drupani, right? So you achieve whatever you wish for. Chudengi chawa gang drupe top mar control chuching, right? So whatever Dharma activity you're doing, you go for refuge to the 3 jewels, right? You don't have to do it all the time. Like, how do you say? You don't have to do it in this very extensive manner, although you can. But I usually do that when I'm starting a new text, like Zu, for example, this year. You just to recite the refuge formula and make a mandala offering. This is the beginning of what I'm doing, right? So every new project you initiate, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to take a whole day of doing pujas, but you get just to remember that, right? So kapsu sone drupa soladapna. So if you first go, you make offerings, and you go for refuge, and you make requests, de laktu drupa ho, right? Then you'll achieve your aims very easily, right? You know, I mean, you also know the rikchong, right? And also the geshi, it's the same. There were things, but they were recited at the beginning of the rikchong, and what the geshis recite when they become geshi. It's the same standard. How do you say? Dole namkar karle nam ganla drupa de tomar kontruk sumla kabjudro. So whatever it says in the sutra, whatever virtuous action you're engaging in, you should first go for refuge. Right? And then he says, yeah, it's basically it's saying when all the previous great masters, they had gone for refuge before they engaged in any kind of virtuous activity. So likewise, myself, when I'm engaging in this virtuous activity, I first go for refuge. They say that before they make their actual recitation, right? So Nyurut Sangyawani. So then you will quickly become a Buddha, right? That's the eighth benefit. Singi Shupales, right? So the sutra requested by lion. I think that's his name. I don't think it's by a lion. Simha, probably. Depe mi kompar, depe mi kom gyur. So with faith, then you will abandon lack of leisure. That's saying. Shesum patar. Delwa kiperchen nyeching. So you find leisure, right? Dilwa, like we say in the 8 leisures, right? Delwa kiperchen nyeching. So you find a very distinguished kind of leisure. Kyaptang, Jelme, and you've met with the refuge. Lam kiperchen lopla, and you're practicing on a distinguished path. Deni ringpami topar sangyawaho. So before long, you will become a Buddha. Detar penyon tremparchene. So then now Tsongkhapa was just saying in general, do you remember these benefits, right? These 8 benefits, or as it was described in the oral tradition. Sha rela nimensum tan senlensum du capsidros jawachao. So every day you should go for refuge 3 times by day, 3 times by night. So that's the end of this precept of remembering the benefits. Now we have the precept of kontruk sudhana shegegichiram sukichiryang mitongxing sumachawani. So right, so even as a joke, you should not give up your refuge. That's important, right? Sometimes you will make these silly jokes about things, like talk sarcastically, but you shouldn't do that, is what it's saying. And then even at the cost of your life, right? There's some examples of that. Some of the people in Tibet, when they were threatened to renounce His Holiness or be executed, they didn't. Although His Holiness has said you should, right? He said, I'd rather you just told them you don't have faith in me than they kill you. So please do that. But some of them don't do that. So I think you have to look at, I mean, His Holiness has said that. I'm not sure what I would do in that kind of situation. It's certainly mentally you don't want to do so, but whether you would do it, it seems to be saying pretty much you should not do that, even if it means giving up your life, right? So Lu Tang Sok Tong Long Chu Ni Domi Sawa Jawa Gyurway. So it's saying it's undoubtable, indubitable, I guess you could say. It's certain that you will be separated from your body and from your life and from your requisites. But if for the purpose of those things you give up your refuge, but then you'll experience suffering in all of your lives, right? It's also in Chunjuk, right? There's that passage in the section on patience, right? Gelde nepe. Nebe tsungirna, sonam dikse sonam chashena, tigran chashena, nepe chiru trogirna, dikse sonam migir sonam se dik migir right? So he says, so it's the argument, right? He's arguing with his tendency to get angry, and it's basically, it says, well, because he's saying that you get angry at people who obstruct your attaining requisites, and it's saying, well, by attaining the requisites of life, I can live a long time, and then I can exhaust my negativities, and I can accumulate lots of merit. It says, but if for the purpose of attaining requisites I get angry, do I not exhaust my merits and accumulate negativity? Right, so that's the point here. And then he says, Gangi dono daksonpa, deni gelin yamgirna, dipa bashik sonani, dipa bashik chipahi, sona dego chichikur, right? So for what purpose am I living? If the purpose of my life degenerates, then by merely engaging in non-virtue, what's the purpose of living? Right? So that's the idea here. And it's of course, just saying the words is one thing, and it's saying basically you shouldn't do that, but especially to think that that you would, extend your life or live in a way that is not in accordance with your values, just so you can continue living. It's kind of defeating the purpose. So chi la bap kyang kap mi tong nyam du yang shedam chashing. Right, so Chila Bab Kyang. So Chila Bab Chila Bab is like, Chila Bab Kyang. I don't know why I wrote this here. But Chila Bab Kyang is like whatever happens. Yeah. I don't know why I wrote melding and jest, because that there's a word, it's not chibab, but there's a similar word, sort of like chibab, that means like this babble, something meaningless babble. But that's not what it's saying here. Chila Bab Kyang Kabzumi Tonga. No matter what happens, do not give up your refuge. Yeah. Chi la bap kyang, right? Whatever happens. Chi is whatever, and bap, whatever befalls you. Do not give up your refuge. Nyamdu yang shedam chashing. So again and again, make a solemn pledge that you're going to do that. And shege tsamgi chedu yang kap tongwetzik mao me chao. So even just for a joke, do not say the words of giving up your refuge. Chokar dro yang. So whenever direction you go, this one. So whatever direction you go or you're going in, so there's advice that whatever direction you're going in, you're traveling, and you should go for refuge to the Tathagatas that abide in that direction. But Tsongkhapa is saying, Gomanam Sungde. So many people have said that, but Kung Mitongo. I haven't seen any source for this. But see, I have a note here. What about Chokun Nunsel? So there's a debate a couple of years ago for us, because in Dua, I have a note here, Kunkin Sonawa, right, the author of our Dua text, on the first volume on page 103, he says you should go for refuge to whatever, the Buddha in whatever direction you're traveling in. So Tsongkhapa says, Gomanam Sung, he was before Tsongkhapa, so people said that before. But he gives a quotation. He says, it's from a sutra called Chokun Munsel, dispelling the darkness of the directions, so whatever direction you're going in. So I don't know, so we could say Kung Matong. Well, it just means he didn't see it, but that's kind of unlikely. Right? Tsongkhapa read Kung and Sono in very great detail. That's actually the text, not Sonawa, but the Dutik, the how do you call it? Chugi Shenian and Gidzepe. He was so famous for his memorization, right? He was in a competition with some other people, and he was memorizing 17 pages a day, and he blew them away because he won the competition, right? So I think he probably saw this quotation, but I don't know. Yeah, for some reason he said he doesn't see it as authoritative, I guess. So Detar Tumangi Lapsha Drukni. So then we have we had the 6 common precepts, right? They're common to all of the 3 jewels, right? As opposed to the ones that are the specifics. So the specific is having gone for refuge to the Buddha, do not did not disparage even a wooden statue or whatever of the Buddha, and having gone refuge to the Dharma, do not harm others. That's the main thing. And then having gone refuge to the Sangha, do not associate with non-virtuous friends. But the Tunmawa are these ones that we just did, are common to all of them. So Labdron Drawa, so in the commentary on the Bodhipadika, right, the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment by Atisha, it's that's where you find them. He's saying in the commentary on that. But Sosur Lapcha, the first three, of the uncommon ones are in the sutras, and then the latter three, Kebju Yanlak Druktrupa Lejungde. It's from Vimalamitra's text, the 6 branches of going for refuge. So when he's quoting it here, GK du Kusuk Siksu Chepa Tang Lempa Sepratapala Demu Gone Dumpadak Shene Sumpa Tadak La. So he's saying, a body of the Buddha, I mean a statue that's, or a verse, Lempa, or just going together with somebody who's just wearing yellow. Depe Gone Dumpadak. So with faith, view them as a Buddha. Shene Sumpa Tadak La, and view it as the speech of the Buddha. And Kora Mida Chiwalam. So do not disparage it, but place it on the crown of your head. Gansak Daktang Madala Dampertawa Chawayin. Right, so whether they're pure or not, right? Whether the person wearing the yellow is pure or not. I think it's not just the yellow, like they're wearing a yellow vest or something. I think the point is that they're wearing robes, is really the idea. Whether they're pure or not, see them as excellent, right? She so. He quotes this one from the Kabjur Lianlag Drupa, but in Kagda Bachidon, it has a similar quote from Shejing, right, by Nagarjuna. I don't know which text came first. Then La Baba Dua Le Jungwan Namla. So the ones that are in Dua, right, in the compendium by Asanga, those 8 ones, Kamawe Sungne. So Kamawa, the Geshe, right, the Kadampa, he said, Denam ne surpa Nezurbat Sung Tangwa La. So he said it's basically the point of, I think, that Nezurpa didn't teach him, his teacher Nezurpa, but Nyampor Gompawa Lato. Together we heard this from the Gompawa. Right, so this is just saying where we got these teachings. And a Kong Ne Lumbawa Gupe Lamrim Nejungo. So then he taught, right? So Kamawa taught Lumbawa, and from that's the lineage by which then it arrived in the Lamrim lineage. Right? Because Tsongkhapa, I think you might know this, the Lamrim doesn't mean the Lamrim of just Tsongkhapa, it's the lineage going back to Atisha, is what he's talking about. And there was Drolungpa before Tsongkhapa, right? He wrote the Tenrim. So that was several generations before. And then Tsongkhapa was just part of that lineage, and then he expanded it in this text. Lapsha Dera Tang Gyawala Nyampatang Tongwe Gyurgir Tsuni. So the way that being in disaccordance with that advice causes your refuge to degenerate and then lose your refuge. Kachik, so some people say, Susulapcha Tang, Susulapcha Dampo Sum Tang, Gyundu Kapsu Drowa Tang, Suki Chiri Yirang, Mitongwa Tang, Konchuk Chupa de Druk. So they give 6. The 3 that are not the 3 uncommon ones, right? So that you don't the 3 uncommon ones, yeah, I think there's the Chima Sum, the Dambo Sum, right? So they might actually be different. Let me just make sure. I don't say it incorrectly. Yeah. The 3 uncommon ones that it's talking about is don't go for refuge to other gods, don't harm others, right, as I said before, and then don't associate with non-virtuous friends. Those are the first 3. So he's saying those first 3, and then also going for refuge continuously, and then for your sake of your life, not abandoning your refuge, and making offerings to the 3 jewels. If you contravene those, you lose your refuge. That's what somebody says. And then another person says, Kachik Sosalapcha Chimasum. So the latter 3 of the Sosalapcha, right, which I think was about the statue of the Buddha and then even just a scrap of a piece of text, and then the people wearing yellow. Tam Gelwana, gu, and then they add 3 more. All of those, you lose your refuge. Lama Nyampegu, all the rest of them, they become just the cause for it to degenerate, but not to lose your vows or your refuge. But Tsongkhapa says, Wunkyang, Suki Chirna Mitongwa Tangyawani, Kabju Tongwa Nyuyama. So he's saying if you contravene the point of, even for the sake of your life, not giving up your refuge, that's the actual cause to lose your refuge, which makes sense. You gave up your refuge. That's what it's saying. To save your own life, you gave up your refuge, so you lose your refuge. But he says, Dei Shindu Kontrok Sum Matanyang, Derata Mitumbe Tumbala Soba Sumla Nizin Chenayang. So he said, but if you do that, if you do not give up your refuge, but you do something doesn't accord with the other ones. Oh, sorry, you go Buntube Tompa. So you go for you hold that other teacher as the 3 Nila, Sopa Sumla, Nizin Cheneyang. So it sounds like you're having 2 refuges, I think is the idea. Shendim Mawatan Gelshing. That is contravening, you're not espousing other refuges. Right? And then Kabla lo Makyawe Tonla. Right? So without holding the the point is, if you hold them as a refuge, I think it's saying, then you lose your refuge. Right? So if you hold a non-Buddhist teacher or religion as your refuge, then you lose your refuge. But it's a dera majuna. But if that doesn't happen, right? If you don't actually say I give up my refuge, or you don't hold a non-Buddhist as your refuge, then it's just merely contravening your training. But tongyu mimper semso, right? It's not. I don't think it's a cause to lose your refuge, is what he's saying. Right? Just because you contravene them. I mean, it would be pretty strict, really. Like you just say this statue of the Buddha is not very nice, and you lose your refuge. That's a bit extreme, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because refuge is not a vow; it's a state of mind. So in your mind, you haven't given it up. So it doesn't make. It's not like like in the monastic vow where you break your root vow, even if you still want to be a monk, you're not. But here it's saying if you have the refuge and you just contravene the vow, it doesn't mean you should. Right? There's a famous passage in Essence of Eloquence. He says, "Chedengi gelangi, chebarangawatsamgi gelami min megopaguro, megopagino." Right? So there's this. I think he's quoting from, or paraphrasing from Chandakirti, right? So there's how Baba Viveka, right? He says that basically he says that things are inherently existent. That's the main point, and that's not appropriate for Madhyamaka, right? For Chandakirti, that's the same as tantamount to saying they truly exist. But then Tsongkhapa says, well, does that mean he's not a Madhyamaka? Does Chandakirti not consider him a Madhyamaka? And he says, well, he does make effort to reject true existence, and he tries to uphold the Madhyamaka tenets. So he is a Madhyamaka, and he said it's like a gelong. They're not supposed to break the rules, but just by breaking the rules, it doesn't mean they're no longer a gelong. Right? So that seems to be the idea here, is that you breaking the rules is not good, but you're not going to lose your refuge. It's only if you actually give up your refuge or go for refuge to a non-Buddhist. Yeah.
Do you want me to ask questions later? Or?
If you can write it down, it's good. Don't forget it. Yeah. Because I said, it's the 3rd time I've said we're going to finish today. We will finish today, unless something disaster happens the next half hour. Detarna Kabsu Jowani. So thereby, going for refuge, Sankiki Tempala Jupe Go Chempo Yinching. Right? That is the door, the portway of entry towards the teachings of the Buddha. Right? That's important in debate. Right? You have I remember because Zopa and Trime, in their class, that's one of the questions that our debate exam has. Various ports of entry is the question. So what is the port of entry for being a Mahayanis? What is the port of entry for the Mahayana path? What is the port of entry for being the Buddhist teachings? And so forth. So here you have very, very clearly, port of entry for the Buddhist teachings is to go for refuge. Kabdro tsiksa mimpar yuna. So if you have a refuge which is not mere words, tu pura chungwa la tempe yimpe. So then it's based on a very strong power, right? Consummate they use sometimes. Pula jungwa. Yimpe. Chi ta nangi barchigi miziwatang. You will not be oppressed by inner and outer obstacles. Nigi kipernam kilashing. And then all of the specifics of all the great qualities will be easy to generate. Nyam kawa, and they'll be hard for them to degenerate. Gone gonde power giro, and they will increase and increase. Ngar shepatar, jikpatang yunden, trempala supitabasugi gone. So then, as I said before, remember the frightening things, right? So that's talking about, you go for refuge with fear and faith. Those are the two main causes, right? So remember the fear of samsara, and then remember the qualities of the three jewels. Kabzu zungjing, and hold them as your refuge. Dilapchele medala bepa nede chewohor. So then making effort not to contravene the training, that is a very important point. So now somebody asks us a question. Detar chiwa drenjing shine ngenju kiwa sampe jikpa na. Right, so if in that way you remember death, and then you remember that after dying, you could be born in the unfortunate migration, and you're afraid, and then dele kyobe katni konchuk sumila, and the thing that frees you from that, the refuge, is the three jewels. Dela kapsu zunshing, and if you hold that as your refuge, de lapchatam magawe chena magawe, and if you hold it as your refuge and you do not contravene the advice, kabgi jitar kyopnyamna. So then how do they protect you? So you might remember I said some pages before it had said they will free you. If you go for refuge, the benefit is that it will protect you from harm. Right? So he said I'll explain that later. So this is where he's explaining that. How do they protect you? Right? No, that's not the right. Anyway, I don't have the exact page, but that's the point, right? He said that before. So it says right here, how do they protect you? It says in the Psalm, right? The Udana Barga, right? The sayings of the Buddha. Sibe sungu choche lam nyeni kecha nam laten. So I have taught you the path that will cut the sungu of existence, right? Sungu, it's like, sharp pain of existence, right? Deshin shekpa tumpate. So the Tathagata has taught you. Kechak namgi chana. So you have to practice it. Chesum patar. So that's what I was saying before. That's really the point. You don't go for refuge and then the Buddha comes out of the sky and saves you. Right? I've often said that to people, that the Buddha, he said that the Four Noble Truths, right? The truth of suffering is birth, age, old age, sickness, and death. It doesn't say by going for refuge with the Buddha, you won't be born or die or experience sickness. That's not the point. You'll be free of the suffering that is associated with those, and eventually you won't be born again because you won't have the karma to be born. But it's not that you go for refuge and you can't get sick. That's not quite the point. But if you practice, then that will bring you there. So Sangye ni kap tumpatang. So the Buddha is the teacher of refuge. Gendu ni kap drupe dro kyempe. And the Sangha is the helper on achieving that refuge. Kap nyuni kontro kokontra. The actual refuge is the Dharma. Right? So this is an important passage here, right? When you debate Kap Zoom later. De topana jikpele drowe churo. So if you attain that, meaning you actualize the Dharma, right? Because remember, we have to always remember this. When we talk about Dharma refuge, it's not talking about the text, right? It's talking about the path, truth of the path, and the truth of cessation. That's the actual refuge. So if you actualize that, then you will be free of suffering, or free of fears. Same idea. Right, so because in Gyulama, right, the Uttara Tantra, it says that the main refuge is the Buddha. right? You'll get to what you have in the Kapsum section in Shyapta Bachidon, right? But the idea there is that anything that's a Buddha is the final refuge, whereas anything that is not a Buddha yet is still provisional. So the Buddha's the truth of the path in the mind of the Buddha, that is a Buddha, right? In this system. Sangye Gyugi Yondanina Sangye Bekap, that's what we say. Right? I mean, so we use it Buddha in English to talk about the person, but in debate, Sangye, it's more than just a person, it's the qualities of the Buddha also. So that is the point, that the truth of the path in the Buddha's continuum, that is the final refuge. It's not the Buddha, truth of the path in the continuum of Arya Bodhisattva, which has not yet achieved the final refuge. So Tai Chokonchok Deyang. So that's what it's saying right here. The final Chokonchok, right? The final Dharma refuge. Le Dambowe Dugi Kyun Chok Kyun Chokreitsam Pongwe Pongwatang. But then, yeah, it's a little different actually here, because he's saying that what is the Dharma refuge? He's saying even just the abandonment of some part of the abandonments of the faults in the mind at the time of a beginner. Right? It's not really a beginner if they've abandoned something, but that's when you first start to have Dharma, and then and then the slight realization of even just a part of the teachings. So that's what we're talking about, and then it increases in more and more. So it's not just, he's saying it's not just like things that just happen basically randomly, like somebody who happens to have qualities in their continuum. That's not the point. That's what you should take as it's saying that the qualities aren't just going to, it's not that you're not, I think the point is this: you're not just going to spontaneously achieve the Buddha's qualities. You have to start with the basic steps, abandon one fault at a time, and gradually you'll abandon all of them. So then Dena Kap Dirani Gemege Drebutang Chepe Naye La Kipper Chene. So if you then in this way become knowledgeable in the divisions of the results of virtue and non-virtue at this juncture, it's not cap Dirani, in this juncture, I read it wrong. At this juncture, then Dorlen Susundu Drupa Shigla Chusu Chagute. So then practicing a correct abandonment and adoption, right? So abandoning the things to abandon and adopting the things to adopt, you should take that as Dharma, right? Leini Jeburan Chepa, Rindu Samne. So Leini, the two karmas means virtuous and non-virtuous karmas, along with their results. Rindu Samne. Think about that again and again. Longdu Susundu Machena, but if you don't then abandon and adopt properly, you will not turn away the cause for birth in the unfortunate migration. So that's what I was saying before, right? It's not just that you take refuge; you actually have to practice. So it's saying you have to now think about what actions to adopt and what to abstain from. Right? So if you're not afraid, if you don't actually generate fear for going to an unfortunate migration, then you will not be free of that, because you won't do anything to free yourself. You have to first identify the problem. Deichir, Drebudusu, Nyanjole Kyopala, Guiduni, Guiduna, Yimi Gewala, Jupa, Chugoshing. So So chu is not chu here is not dharma. It's chu, it's like to mend, right? So that I was saying at the time of the result, Jebudusu, Nyenjule Droa Kyopala. So at the time of the result, which is going to be birth in a lower realm, in order to be free of that, at the time of the cause, you have to mend your mind. You have to stop your mind from engaging in non-virtue. Right? It's not it's too late once you already have the cause, the result ripening. So the time of the cause, you should fix your mind that it doesn't go into non-virtue. That depends upon finding faith in karma and the results of karma. So then that's the next section. He's just segueing into the next section here, right? So now, yes, we did finish. Now we have the next section. So this is, we had, right, so we remember that we're in the Kebu Chungu still, right? The lower capable being, path shared by the common low capable being. And that has, right, so Jikten di Ringdom Nepar Niruchiwa, right? So knowing that this life is not going to last long, you're going to die soon. And then Dizenchima Dewe Tempala, so in the way of relying upon the method for having happiness in the next life. So the first was Dempa Lajupe Go Dampa Kyabjo. So then training in going of refuge, which is the door, port of entry for the teachings. Now we have Delaktam Chikitsawa Yijigi Depa Kipoho. So then generating faith in the root of all happiness and goodness, which is karma. Faith in karma, which is the root of all happiness and goodness. That's the idea. So yeah, that's quite important, right? I think really the karma is the fundamental teaching of the Buddha, right? It's sometimes people talk about emptiness and then they say, but they don't believe in karma, they believe in emptiness. I think that's not quite the point of what the teachings on emptiness are about, right? The reason that they gave the teachings on emptiness originally was to try to explain how karma works, because this became a big debate in India. After the Buddha passed away, then there was all this debate about, well, he said there's karma, how does it all work? And they're trying to make sense of it in a way that makes sense within their current worldview. And so then the Vaibhashika, they came up with all of these kind of unusual ideas about what carries the karma, and then none of it really made a lot of logical sense. So it was hard for anyone to take it that seriously unless they already had faith in it. But then the Madhyamaka and the Chittamatra, they came up with much more philosophically sound ideas that were quite compelling about what is it? What is karma? What does it actually mean? How does this function? And that's what emptiness is finally about. Like you'll see in chapter 17, Sawasheta, right, Root Wisdom, he just goes, the whole first part of the chapter is just listing all of karma and all the results and all of this. And then somebody says, well, if that's not true, what is? And then so Nagarjuna goes on to say that none of it's true, right? But the point is, it's not real in the way that not that anything is not real, really, right? If it was, it couldn't function. But there's a way that this can function in a way that's unreal, but it still functions. And then other people commented on that, and then Chandrakirti came up with very creative ways of trying to understand what that really means. How does it still function even if it's not real? It's actually quite the opposite, that it allows for it to function. It shouldn't be this argument that, well, because everything is empty, how could there possibly be reincarnation, and how could there be cause and effect? It's not. That's the opposite reason, really. That's a classical debate that they've had, right? But here we're not talking about the ultimate effects of the ultimate nature of karma. That's going to come in the special insight section much later. It's just the general presentation of karma and understanding of what it says in the text. So, in that sense, as we said, this is not a very hidden phenomenon, karma. Specifics are specific things, but what's the result of a particular action at a particular time and when. But in this context, it actually is kind of presented almost like a very hidden thing, because it's not giving the reasoning that's backing it up, right? But it's just giving you a general idea of what's the presentation. But it shouldn't be taken as thereby, because he's giving all these quotations and it's saying you should believe in this because it says this in the book, right? We do talk about this a lot. It's something people question. It's just to get you, but still just getting familiar with the terminology and to think about it. Even if at first you might just be based on a kind of faith without really a clear understanding of how it happens. But if you have that kind of faith, it's at least helpful for not then being aware of this action could be very detrimental. But as you gain more understanding, you can start to actually question it and start to gain some sense of confidence that this actually can happen. There could be a way this could work, right? So that's what we do here. That's, I think, one of the main purposes of the program is to have people gain more conviction in laws of karma, that you actually question it and you see how it could actually make sense. Not just how it could, but gain more and more sense of confidence that this really does make sense. It makes more sense than other ways of presenting things and other philosophies. So anyway, so we can go through all of it. It's this presentation on karma, right? It's mainly taken from we said the Ngompa Gongok Ni, right? To higher and lower Abhidharma, right? Which is Abhidharma Kosha, Ngompa Zu, and then Abhidharma Samuchaya by Atsanga at the Ngompa Kundu. So, and then with lots of quotations from sutras, but the general presentation of it is taken from those. So we're going to study that this year in Zu, right? Because we actually haven't studied that part yet. But we've already studied it in the sense that most of the points have already come up. They told us that that's going to be one of the easier parts this year because although the chapter 4 is quite long, it's all things that we've already talked about especially in Parchin and in Uma, mainly in Parchin, and then in Sema a bit too, right? And then Dua, of course, you talk about it, but the actual functions of it, like in Tencho, that's when you really get it in the circle here, right? The 12 links of dependent origination. There's a very long presentation of karma there, and you debate about that a lot. So we're already very familiar with a lot of the debates around it. But this year we'll just go through the text, and there's all kinds of other little points that come up, of course. In Kundu, we don't study separately. Right? We'll study it the last 2 years of Laramba. It'd be nice to finally read the text because they quote it so much, but we never actually study it as a separate discipline. So anyway, Telak tam chiki tsawa hi chiki deba kepalasum, right? So generating faith. So it's saying the root of happiness and goodness, which is generating faith in karma. But it doesn't. That's what's funny. It doesn't say ledre. It just says telak tam chiki tsawa yiche. So it almost sounds like generating faith in the root of happiness, but that's not the point. Generating faith in karma is the root of happiness. That is the point. So you have Leidre Chir Sampa, so the general contemplation of karma and its results. Then Chedaktu Sampa, right? And then a more specific thinking about that's talking about like the 10 non-virtues, right? And then Samne Jukdok Chawetsul, right? So then having thought about it, then what do you engage in, what do you turn away from? So karma in its results, right? It's good to remember that karma is not the result. So Gaba mentions that in the Golden Garland. He says, people say, oh, it's my karma to be sick or this or that. That's a loose term, but it's not really what's happening, right? The karma was the cause. And then you have that potential, and then conditions ripen and you're sick. It's not that your karma is sickness. Your karma was whatever action you did in the past, right? So Dambolani, the first and the general presentation has Chir Samsu, the actual general way of thinking about it, and Susuchede Sampo, and then dividing it into pieces and then thinking about it. So why is that? You could debate, well, why is that different from the second? So you have general presentation, then specific presentation. The general presentation has the real general presentation and then the divided presentation. It sounds like it's the same thing as the second outline point, the second chapter, but anyway, we'll see as we get there what the difference is, right? So dividing it is talking about the 10 paths. That's talking about the 10 non-virtues, actually. So the specific way of thinking about it is the specific way of thinking about it is another way of dividing it. Is thinking about ripened results and ripened results and results concordant with the cause, and then empowered results, which they've translated as environmental results, right? So that's the idea. That's what specific kinds of karma, right? As opposed to specific actions. And so you'll get that when you get to the section, the 12 links, right? In the second link, that's when it comes up, right? The Duchiki Tenjo. Then there's this whole presentation of karma, and there's all these different ways of dividing it. You have contaminated, uncontaminated karma. And then you have unmoving karma and virtuous karma and non-virtuous karma, or non-meritorious is the word. And then you have yigile, sampele, sempele, right? So how do you even translate that? Sempele, sempele. It's like intention, karma of intention versus karma of thinking. I don't even know how you should translate it, but that means the actual bodily action as a result of thinking about it, right? So all these different ways of dividing it. So that's what you get there. So Dambolashi, the first, the actual general way of thinking about it, it's very technical, has four. So it's the four general laws of karma, essentially, right? So le ngepa, karma is definite. Le pelchewa, karma increases. Le matrepatang, matrepa. You will not meet with the result of a karma that you did not create. And then le chena, chumi sawa, what is it? Le chena, nyempo majomna, something like that. Then chumi sawa, right? So if you do the karma and you don't, nothing blocks it, like you don't apply an antidote or something, and it will not exhaust itself naturally, right? So this is the way in which karma is definite. This is the first one, right? Now, this was one of my favorite debates from the 12 Links. It was a very hard debate because you have definite and indefinite karma, right? So then indefinite karma, what is indefinite karma? It's very, very hard to define that. And how does it not contradict this? Karma is definite, right? A few years ago, when the Rick Chen, right, the last year of Larampa, he came to our Kangsan, and I started the debate. I just asked him that question. I didn't have to do much more because the Petigans were all there. They debated, but he couldn't really answer the question, and then he really had quite a hard time trying to defend himself because it's not easy to answer that. What are you gonna say?
I would answer from what I heard through commentaries and some teachers that
Okay.
The definite aspect is that positive karmas have positive results.
Okay.
And that a positive deed can never have a negative result, right? In that sense, they're certain because what will come about. And for example, it is certain that by giving, you will become rich in general. And for what is uncertain is to what degree, as you said before, the specifics get amplified by
the conditions that will.
Yes,
but the point is there's a division. There's a division in the text of what you call definite and indefinite karma. It's not saying a particular karma has both definite and indefinite aspects. It's saying certain aspects are called definite karma, certain are called indefinite karmas. What does it mean? First of all, which ones become which? But secondly, the ones that are indefinite, what does it mean?
So what I heard from this commentary was that the way it was used was, for example, if I give, it doesn't mean I will have a good rebirth because that depends on my.
Right, but my point is, it's not talking about two aspects of the same action. It's saying, for example, if I kill somebody intentionally, that's a definite karma. If I step on a bug because I'm not being careful, that's an indefinite karma. So what does it mean that one is definite, one is indefinite?
I don't remember. There was.
Did you know before?
Yeah, we studied that in Abhidharma in Hamburg. I don't know.
Well, as I'm saying, the best student from the highest year of the Larampa class, when we asked him this question, he couldn't give a good answer. It's not an easy answer by any means. It's not in the text. It certainly does not say in any text. This is exactly, it does. So in Kundu, the Abhidhamma Sambuchaya, he gives certain characteristics of definite karma. But then it's still like, well, what does it say? Like you'd say in debate, like in a debate format, what is the measure of definite karma? Right, so then Gentokme, right, who's obviously, as I've said, I think probably the best debater at Sarah J.
because he knows exactly what to say. He just put this question, well, when we say definite, do we mean that even if, what is it? That it's definite to give its result, regardless of circumstance, or do we mean that, what is it? He said, yeah, he said, is it definite from the perspective, what is it? Is definite from the perspective of the Buddha, who knows that it's definitely going to give it as a result, or is it talking about the nature of the karma that has some particular nature that's different from an indefinite karma, right? It's different, right? Because we could say that, well, it's indefinite in the sense that the Buddha knows it's not going to ripen, as opposed to there being some actual difference in the karma. And in certain texts, they actually say it differently. That's one of the things about Indian texts, is they're not very standardized, oftentimes. So the different texts will use the term in a different way, and the Tibetans were much more careful about trying to specifically define what they mean by something. And so that Tsongkhapa would often then, in certain texts, he would say, well, they say this, but they mean this, right? Because the point is, they're using the same term for something different. Like Baba Viveka would say in certain contexts, things do not inherently exist. Sometimes they say they do. But then Tsongkhapa says it's not that he doesn't have a clear idea of what he means, he just doesn't use the same term all the time. So likewise, when they say definite karma, sometimes they mean different things. But how do we define it? What do we mean definite, indefinite karma? Anyway, I wasn't meaning to have a debate, although it's interesting. It's good that we have the discussion, but I think we can, yeah, you think about that. In a few years, you'll have a debate about it. I wrote a little thing about the 12 links, right? I've written an article every year, so when you get there, I had that in that article. You can see if you find it helpful. I didn't have a definite answer either.
I think Dhamma Jyoti wrote in Sarvastivada Abhidharma about that, but I can't find it.
Dhamma Jyoti.
Dhamma Jyoti from Hong Kong. Venerable Bhikkhu Dhamma.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So anyway, Leng Ebetsu, right? The way in which karma is definite. So this is different, right? This is not saying that there is, because that's a division of definite and indefinite karma. Here it's talking about just in general the way karma is definite. It's talking about something different. It's using the same term but in a different way. Yeah. So like in the Vinaya it says if you confess a definite karma, then it will thin, but it will not purify it. Right? It's talking about something different. Whereas if you confess a definite karma, an indefinite karma, then it will not ripen. Right? But again, it doesn't say exactly what they are, but it's just saying that's what happens when you confess them or not. But here it's talking about karma definite. It's you're saying that a positive result will definitely have a positive action will have a positive result if it gives a result.
Yes, and also the specific.
Right. Yeah. So, and then a negative action. It's not, the specific is not definite, right? It's not saying that if you give, you're necessarily going to ripen as requisites, right? It could ripen in different ways.
But doesn't it say that it has to ripen either as an increase or a decrease in requisites, rather than, I can't say, okay, for example, I didn't keep my vows well, so I'm just going to be very generous and dedicated to having like.
Right. Yeah. So that. Yeah, in a general sense, yes, right? Because you just being very generous is not going to be the cause to be born as a human being, essentially, right? But we could be creative about different ways that it could ripen, right? That you like you have a sense of being very greedy, or you have a sense of being very generous and acting on that. And then because they say it's inconceivable. The way that it could ripen as a ripened result, it could ripen as an environmental result. So you live in a world that somehow you just have this vague sense of always not having enough, and things around you just don't go well, like whatever. It's like all kinds of different, very, very subtle things in your experience that it's very hard to see exactly how that comes. Because it's not like a particular action that creates a particular result in the end, right? It's that they're kind of mixed together and they ripen. If you were to pinpoint exactly, it's not that they override each other per se, but it's like a rainbow in some sense. They all ripen as a very complex experience that you to pinpoint particular aspects of it and say that's this, that's this. It's very difficult, right? But the point is, ultimately, there will never be a case where you'll have a positive experience as a result of creating a negative action.
So were you saying that there are ways in which it is possible that generosity could ripen as if it had been proper tutoring?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, it's interesting because, like, you see things in the text. It says, by prostrating to this stupa, you'll be born as a wheel turning king, right? That would imply that that becomes the cause to be born as a wheel turning king, right? And then generosity. So can it be a impelling karma, throwing karma? Well, why not?
Yes.
If it's an impelling karma, then it has to be in a higher realm, right? It's quite a bit of debate about this point, right?
I mean, I could understand if you say, for example, then you have all the requisites. For example, then you don't need to steal in the future, or like requisites.
Right, but what I'm talking about specifically, an impelling karma has to, the meaning of impelling karma is it impels a particular birth, right? And what can be an impelling karma? It has to do mainly with the strength. It doesn't say particular kinds of karma are impelling particular actions are completing karma. Right? It mainly has to do with the strength. And something can be both impelling and completing. It can impel one life, and then the after effects of that can be completing karma in a future life. Right?
Yeah, I'm sorry if it might contradict that, but one teaching I listened to said that, for example, the generosity itself cannot give different rebirths.
I know what you're saying.
The
That's
dogs
generally what they say. Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I'm saying that I don't know who said that, and yeah, it does actually say that in text for sure. But I'm saying, well, we can debate that. Well, it's very clear that positive karma, if it is an impelling result, a impelling cause, it impels a higher birth. And negative karma, if it acts as an impelling cause, it impels a lower birth. So why could generosity not be an impelling karma? Right? What is the criteria for something being an impelling karma? It mainly seems to have to do with the strength of it. And it's, as I'm saying, it says very clearly in the text that if you prostrate to a stupa, you're born as a wheel-turning king. So that becomes an impelling karma. That's not guarding ethics. You're prostrating to a stupa. It's more like generosity. Right?
I seem to understand that what was taught was that ties in with the things being definite. That I understand what you were saying before, but that the definite karma is the one that impels the type of gati, the type of
A birth, yeah.
birth where you go, and then the for example, Jimpa would define the quality of that birth. So
right, but you're saying the impelling karma. You said the definite karma is the one that's going to be causing the particular birth. You said, right? So why can't generosity being a definite karma?
Because from what I was taught there was that it only defines the quality.
Right, I know what you're saying, but I'm saying in debate at a certain point, saying I was taught this, or even if it says in the text, even if the Buddha said it, the point is here. Well, we have to understand how that actually works.
Because it's a different type of karma.
Right, but the point is here that we're saying strong karma impels birth. That is a statement in the text, right? So if strong karma impels birth, why can't giving be a strong karma? I'm aware that it contradicts something else that it said, but the question is then we have to line that up. Well, it seems to contradict itself. It's good to point that out because then you might get a more subtle understanding of what they're talking about.
Yeah, because also on the other hand, like say for example, those karmas that do propel the rebirth, like
Mhm.
for example your ethics, they also define the quality of the rebirth. Say for example, if you never lie, or if you keep your vows,
Mhm.
you have better relationships, and that also defines the quality of uh, the the particular rebirth, rather than only the specific realm in which you're reborn. So that the one with the karma which propels you into a certain
Yeah. So again, you see that it doesn't seem to be a one-to-one correspondence, right? And we say, well, guarding ethics causes a positive rebirth. Which guarding ethics? So I was Gelung for most of my life. Does that, which action that I did is impelling the next life? What does it mean to guard ethics? Does my not killing impel my next birth? But not killing is not an action, right?
well, the fact that I'm just taking that person's position. So the fact that you didn't contravene the totality of your Gilon vows, there could be like for example, you have a pillar, you have like a roof with 4 pillars,
Yes.
and whichever pillar you really break
Okay.
makes the roof crumble.
Right.
So if you sufficiently guard all 4 necessary pillars
Okay.
in order to keep the roof intact,
Okay.
that totality together propels you into.
So that totality is karma?
No, the totality is like what propels you is that all these aspects of Tsurchim that you've kept,
So all of them individually are karma.
all of them are individually necessary to
But I'm
have.
saying, which is the karma? You have to pay, which is the karma? And which action did I do to be born that way?
So the action you've done is not contradicting your Gelong vows, right?
So the action is, so again, in debate terminology, it follows that the action is a negation.
No, it's a tsokpa. It's a combination.
So
of
not
things.
contradicting my Gelling vows is a combination of things. But it's
Yes.
still a negation, right? Not doing something.
Or it is a doing of the, you could also invert it.
A doing of what though?
Like following up your promises.
Following up.
Fulfilling the promise.
So which, I mean, so for example, usually we say if you do an impelling karma, it's a particular action, right? So what day of my life did I do that? I've been a Gelong for 20 years.
Every single day. You've been
Well, so yeah, but
fulfilling
we're
the
saying
promise.
in impelling karma, usually it's said you have to point to a particular action, not every single day. That's very vague.
No, okay, okay. Then it's like, say for example, I promised to you, dear Gengachi, I'm going to go to Kushanagar and buy carrots for you.
Okay.
Right? So every moment I'm going to Kushanagar and I'm not going to Mysore to the cinema, I'm not going to Bangalore to fly wherever. I'm on my way to fulfilling that promise, and I go to Kushanagar, buy the carrot, come home, and give it to you.
Right. So
And
which,
so,
so you made the
yeah. If I can just
Okay.
finish that. So in the same way, until you die,
Okay.
you don't contravene your Gilon vows.
Yeah.
You've brought the carrots back to Gengachi.
Okay.
And then you have fulfilled the promise you made in front of the Buddha or your preceptor to say, I will keep these vows. So first you say, I set out to go and buy the carrots by keeping the vows. Then you go and do it. So you fulfill what you've said. Maybe you've squandered a little bit here. Maybe you've like drunk some tea on the way. Maybe you did some other things. But fundamentally, you bring back the carrots. It's the same way as, okay, sometimes maybe you sing a song or maybe you like make jokes and it kind of like impinges a little bit on your vows, but it doesn't break them. Until you die, that's the moment of truth, and that propels.
Okay, so you're saying the moment of death is the impelling karma.
The moment of death is when the action is complete.
So the moment of death is the moment. The impelling karma can be pointed to as an action of the moment of death. So it's one action over over your whole life. It's one action over your whole life.
It starts from when you say.
Right. So okay. So, but I'm saying that logically that could make some sense. The point is it's usually presented in the text as you have to point to a particular action. You do a particular action at some time in your life, and then at the time of death, it's ripened by the actualizing karma, which is different, right? So my point is not to say that what you're saying is unreasonable. I'm saying that when we're trying to interpret what the text is saying, it does not seem to line up with what the text is saying, which is that there is a particular action that's done at a particular time. Of all the actions you do in your life, one of them is very strong. Yeah.
Right, but the completion
Right, but that's not one action. You were sleeping in the meantime, right? So that's no longer one action. A particular action has to be intention, unbroken intention with result. So if there's a
But
sleep
how does
in,
it contradict that?
because it's many actions over many years, right?
Well,
And um, there's many facets to it, as opposed to pointing to a particular thing, right?
But according to that logic, could you say, okay, oh, going to the exam is not going to the exam because it consists of many mini actions like getting your pen, getting your paper, getting yourself ready, getting your little ID card around the neck, and so it's not going to the exam.
Yeah,
Because
maybe
going
you
to the
could say
exam
that.
is
That's
one action.
yeah. Then it becomes quite problematic, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I think that's missing the point because obviously you get the results of having gone to the exam because you can go to the next year.
Well, you got the results of filling out the exam. You didn't get any results from walking there, right? You didn't get they didn't grade you on
Okay,
how well
if
you
you
walked.
didn't go, if you didn't walk, if you didn't go there, could you have done the exam?
You could, if you didn't come to Sarah, you couldn't have done the exam, right?
Right, so it's a necessary precondition for the fulfillment of the action that propels you to the
Right, but then
benefit of
then you
the
have to
next
say that basically every action in your life is part of the whole process, and thereby all of it is the impelling karma.
Yeah, and yeah, that's
So I think let's put this aside. I apologize because I think everyone else I'm not sure if people are finding this is all that helpful. But this is what the kind of things we would want to debate, right? It's very important. Get very clear about what they're saying. It's not a matter of whether it's true or not. That's a different question, right? But to get the point here is just to get clear about what he's actually saying in the text. So because you have to be very otherwise it's like debate. It's like, how do you say, destroying a straw man. You have a wrong understanding of what the text. I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying in general, somebody could have a wrong understanding of what the text is actually saying, and then say, "Oh, karma doesn't function because it couldn't possibly work." We have this. People say, "Well, karma is fatalism," right? But that's not what it's saying here, right? It's not saying that any action. I'm not saying they're saying this. I'm saying people say this, that they'll hear about karma and get a misapprehension of what the text is actually saying it means, or what the Buddha said it means, and then argue against it. So you're not actually arguing against the teaching itself. So it's the point here is just to get a very clear picture of how it's described. Later, we actually discuss, well, how could this work? That's also part of the debate. But when we talk about, for example, when we talked about the 12 links, I said we talked about karma a lot. It was just to get very, very clear about what the text actually says. What do they mean by particular words, and what are they pinpointing? So I think we actually, we have to basically finish now. We can have question and answer, which we had. Yeah.
Aninseki has a question.
Yeah. Good.
So Aninseki asks, can Gengachi talk about the power of the object? Is it true that if you have afflictions present in your mind while engaging in activities relating to the three jewels, that you cannot experience a negative result?
It's a complex question. So first of all, there's the power of the object, right? That's talked about, and I think we already went over that at some point in here, yeah. Because we said that part where he says, when you meditate when you learn the text, but the words don't stay in your mind. When you think about it, but you can't understand it. When you meditate, but you have no result, that's when it's time to rely on the power of the object. Yeah, we had that some time ago. But anyway, so the point there is that, yes, there is, and he says also at another different point in the Lamrim, he says, what is it? If you don't understand this, I'm trying to remember the context, but he says, then except for by the power of the object, then none of your actions will become pure. So he implies that there is some kind of exception, right? So the idea anyway is that objects based on their the causes that have brought them into existence, for example, the prayers of the Buddha that brought about the Buddha's body and the Buddha's emanations and activities, and then the stupas that we make, that people make many prayers, and then that's why when we make stupas, it's so complicated, because people have to be very mindful of everything they're doing and all these different people that have to come together to make it. and the power of the Buddha that is said to be present in the stupa, it's a dependent arising, then that's a difficult one, right? And so that how that works exactly, I think that's a different question. And rather than getting too much into that now, the point is, the idea here is that actions toward that object are very powerful one way or the other. And because of the power, it will still ultimately be of benefit to the person by making connection with that. So even if somebody intentionally harms the Buddha or destroys a stupa or something, then in the long run, that will benefit them because they're making a karmic connection. But it doesn't mean, in the short run, it doesn't mean it won't have a negative result, right? So it doesn't mean that because of course we say one of the 5 actions of uninterrupted result is to harm the Buddha. So it's clear that if you do negative actions towards a holy object, there will be a negative result. But in the very long run, it will actually benefit you because you're making that karmic connection with them. But I think that the point more about the power of the object is that even if it's a neutral mind, right, there's no harm. You look at the Buddha and just, okay, I saw this person. There's not a negative action, but actually it will have a positive result, it's saying. Or like a fly goes around the stupa, right, and then there's a positive result. So again, it's sort of what the fly.
He said it's doubtful that the fly, without any positive intention, is flying around
the stupa
actually creates positive merit.
Yeah, I mean that's a debate, of course, right? It says that in the text very clearly that it does, right? There's a famous sutra where there's an old man who wants to ordain, and it's given was one of the examples of the Buddha's clairvoyance being stronger than the Arhat's clairvoyance, where Shariputra says, well, you can't ordain, I don't see any roots of virtue in your mind stream. And then the Buddha says, actually, in a very distant past life, he was in a fly and rode a piece of dung around the stupa, right?
Or like the beggars were sent on the mill asking for money. I think there are some benefits.
Oh, yeah.
Even the intention.
Yeah. So the point is that by making the where was I going with that? So the understanding anyway in the text is certainly that even if there is not the positive intention from the person's side, that there is still a result. Now, it's good if Dr. Pereser wants to debate that. Sure, it's debatable. We debate that in debate. But again, that it is what it's saying. So we have to see, well, what could it mean? Well, how could that work? Well, if we say, well, it doesn't make sense, well, why not? We have to debate about that. Well, how do I know? How do I know how karma works? Maybe it's, as I said, it's not necessarily a very hidden phenomenon, but it doesn't mean it's very obvious either. So we have to discuss how could that make sense? Could you make a logical argument about how that works? But again, that's not the point here. The point is just about, so if you have a negative action in the mind, then what is the result, or even a neutral mind? There's also the story of Dzogchen. Dzogchen was one of the 6 Tirthikas, right, who debated with the Buddha and tried to defame him during his lifetime, right? And so there's this talk in Madhyamaka class about like how does he get that negative mind towards the Buddha? And there's some question of whether you can generate an affliction toward the Buddha. Right? There's quite a bit of debate about that. And so it's like one of my classmates was saying, his interpretation of it anyway was that you actually, if you have a sense consciousness perceiving the Buddha, it's impossible for that to be mixed with affliction, because the power of the Buddha, it says, they call it Nyoma Mebe Tingizin. It says this in Parchin. So wait, listen, yeah. So it says in Parchin about the power of the Buddha's concentration is so strong that it affects those around him to pacify their afflictions when they are near him. So my classmate's point, his feeling was that if the direct perception, it's just impossible, because the reason the debate comes up in Uma, it says, Nawatami Tumpamepa, the Buddha cannot appear discordantly. He appears beautiful to all people. So what about the person who's angry at him, which by definition, if you have anger, they appear to you as displeasing. So his interpretation was that the sense consciousness does not see it, but then later when they go and think about it, they have all kinds of namdok, right? All kinds of thoughts that get in the way, and then they start imposing all this anger on it. But because anyway, in Chechen Chökyi Gyaltsen, in his text on Uma, he says he doesn't see him, basically, that he sees a projection, which makes it basically seem that he's not even like his eye consciousness is not actually seeing the Buddha. It's like it's invisible to him. It's quite, yeah, it's not clear how that would happen, but that's a big point of debate there. So, can you actually generate that kind of mind? Of course, people like Devadatta were angry at the Buddha in his lifetime, but how does that work? And is it possible to do that? Because there's some story I'm thinking of where like that when the person was close to the Buddha, they kept losing their mind of anger to hit them, but it's only when they were away that they kept their mind is kept making this up again, right? Yeah. So
I was just gonna say that if you see the Buddha
yeah,
as how the Buddha is, you would have to have a level of development that precludes you of generating anger.
well, I'm not saying to see the Buddha as he is, like you see the Sambhogakaya. The point is just that you see there's a person in front of you and you see them, and that it appears pleasing to people, that it just appears as something that's attractive, and not attractive in the colloquial sense, but like you do Onwa in Tibetan, right? It's pleasing to the mind.
Well, from the power of the object, I think sometimes it's very good to also look at your direct experience. And many people have mentioned, for example, when Kevin Subarubuch's relic tour was going around the world, that sitting there, all kinds of things happened. The people generated loving kindness much more easily. Some ailments went away. They made up their family. So that was definitely by the power of the object, because it was people with no specific intention, neither positive nor negative, entering that kind of domain, having the benefit you were describing. So I sometimes think about that.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we finish? She didn't say anything else, no?
I didn't get another question. No.
Okay, yeah, all right. So why don't we finish there? We can have the closing prayers.
For my two collections, was the space that I amassed from working
With effort of this practice for a great length of time,
time,
and become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds, wisdom, eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all my lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete Veda paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Strength means strong for the roaring forth of compassion. May I clear the minds from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. Below the teachings for a very long time. Going out with great compassion, with every direction, the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I expose famous and aid. The ends of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace. By its needs be nourished for a long even this graded path to enlightenment, completed to the wonders of virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons, and of even non-human beings who act in complexity and act with conditions for acting excellent dharma, path in any of their lives, the pure path praised by the Buddha. Now, if someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Nahan and virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Okay. Thank you. It's okay. It's okay. We do next time.
Should we do it?
It's okay. It's over. Thank you.
You can interrupt me when I'm doing something like that.
Oh, no.
Just say, hey,
It's okay.
it's easy. Because I thought that candle. Yeah.
Oh no, I closed my notebook.
No,
I'm going to something.
Yeah.
I have to start again.
Because you have no internet, right?
No, I don't have Wi-Fi. I just have my phone. I was almost finished.
It's so funny because I still have 2-3 questions since 2 times, and I could never ask things. I'm thinking maybe but the questions multiply, right?
Yeah.
Okay, again, lecture, he will come and,
But I have to finish because I think it's in live, right?
it's still live, yeah, but he will cut it once it's, I think it's being streamed live, so, you know, Anitseki can follow what we're saying.
I
But
see.
later, lecture, he will cut out what is unnecessary and then upload that. So, but I think he did say I can push this button. I don't want to do it. Oh, there it is. I was just gonna connect you. So pushing the button
Yeah, you got
on the top left and then stop, yes.